Welcome! In this lesson, we will explore how curriculum evaluation is made meaningful through the assessment of learning outcomes. By the end of this presentation, you will be able to understand that curriculum can be evaluated through assessment of learning outcomes, identify different levels of learning outcomes and their corresponding assessment levels, match outcome levels with suitable assessment tools, and recognize the role of grades as reflections of student achievement. Curriculum evaluation doesn't just mean checking of topics were taught. It means asking, did students actually learn? This is where assessments come in. Assessment tools such as tests, projects, or portfolios helps us measure whether learning outcomes have been achieved. These tools also determine the grades students receive. Let's connect this to the Philippine Qualification Framework or PQF. This national system recognizes that learners know and can do, regardless of how they gain the knowledge, be it through school, work, or lifelong learning. The PQF has 8 levels. Level 1, Basic Knowledge and Skills at Grade 12. Level 6, Broad Professional Skills at the baccalaureate level. Level 7, Specialized Research-Oriented Skills for Masters. And Level 8, Expert Knowledge and Innovation at the doctoral level. Each level includes expectations across 3 competency domains such as knowledge, skills, and values, understanding critical thinking, ethics, application, real-world, professional, and research use, degree of independence, from guided practice to leadership roles. For curriculum with assessments to align, we must choose the right tool for the right learning level. Basic recall, use multiple choice. Application, try performance task. Independence or leadership, capstone projects or thesis defenses work best. Assessment should match the depth of the learning outcome. Thank you for watching. Keep aligning your assessment with your learning outcomes and let's make education truly meaningful.
Matching the competencies and outcomes with the PQF by doing learning assessment.
So the Philippine Qualifications Framework, or PQF, as what was mentioned, is a national system that sets the standards for educational qualifications here in our country. It defines what learners are expected to know, and value at different levels of education, from basic education to doctoral studies. And to measure how well students achieve these learning outcomes, the Department of Education uses the KPUP grading system, KUP which stands for Knowledge, Process, Understanding, and Performance. These 4 levels describe different types of learning outcomes and how they are assessed. We have for level 1, which is knowledge. This involves recalling facts, concepts, procedures, and metacognition. So for example, students identify parts of the body or describe a typhoon. Next, we have level 2, which is process, focuses on skills to apply knowledge, such as dissecting a frog and identifying its parts. Next, we have level 3, understanding, means making a meaning of big ideas, like explaining how weather elements interact to cause climate change. And lastly, we have for level 4, which is performance, is about creating products or projects that show learning, such as a portfolio, a one-act play, or a research paper on indigenous plants. So the PQF has 8 levels, with level 1 as the lowest and level 8 as the highest, covering all education from basic to postgrad. So now let's have assessment tools for knowledge, process, and understanding learning outcomes. Assessment helps teachers know if students have learned what they are supposed to. And in learning, there are 3 important outcomes, namely knowledge, process, and understanding. For knowledge, this means remembering facts, concepts, and procedures. There are different types of tests used to measure what students know, how they think, and how well they understand a subject. One main type is the objective test. This test has only one correct answer for each question. It can be hard to make but easy to grade. First, we have pencil and paper test. This test is usually written on paper and students answer with a pencil. Today, it can also be done electronically, making it paperless. So we have parts of it, which is first we have simple recall test, wherein this test check if students remember facts. So for example, we have fill in the blanks. Next, we have alternative response test. These give only two choices, like true or false, or yes or no questions. So for example, we have for true or false. We have the Philippine population has reached 1 million. It is a true or false. And for the yes or no, we have has the Philippine population reached 1 million? Like that. Next, we have multiple choice test. So this is the most common and flexible test for we encounter it all the time, especially during tests. It has a question or incomplete sentence called the stem, and also several options to choose from. And only one option is correct, called the answer, of course. And the others are wrong, which are called distractors. Sometimes all options are correct, but one is the best answer. And lastly, we have matching type test. So this test has two columns. The first column has the questions or problems, and the second column has the answers. Students match the correct pairs. It is good for testing facts and relationships. So for example, we have for column 1 would be a person, would be a name of a person, and the other column would be on his or her achievements. Or it could also be for the first column would be the parts, and for the second column would be its functions, like that. So using the right tools for each type of learning helps teachers measure students' progress well. These also supports quality education and helps students grow in their learning journey.
Now, we are going to explore different types of test items used to evaluate learning, focusing on matching types and essay tests. Let's begin with the matching type tests. There are two types of matching tests. First, we have perfect matching type. In this type, the number of premises in column A is less than the number of responses in column B. Each response can be used only once. For example, in column A, there are popular descriptions of Philippine presidents during their term of office. Match them to the correct names in column B. So in column A, Ramon Magsaysay and Carlos P. Garcia and Corazon Aquino. So match them to the correct answer. For example, man of the masses, people power president, Filipino first policy, and champions of first land reform of law. Second, we have imperfect matching type. In this type, the number of premises in column A is not equal to the number of responses in column B. A response may be used once or more than once. For example, in column A are names of well-known curriculum evaluators. Match them with the evaluation models they have been identified with in column B. So in column A, for example, consumer-oriented model, responsive model, CIIP model, goal-free model, and Phi Delta Kappa model. So in column B, there are proponents which are Michael Scriven, Daniel Schaffelbeam, Robert Stake, and Ralph Tyler. Now, let's move on to subjective tests, specifically the essay type tests. Subjective tests assess learning outcomes that involve expressing ideas, insights, and opinions. Since subjective tests focus on learners' ability to organize and present ideas, they are difficult to assess through objective type tests. Thus, subjective tests often involve writing essays. So there are two types of essay tests. First, we have restricted response item. So this type limits both the content and the form of the student's answer. It is most useful for measuring learning outcomes that require the interpretation of and application of data within specific area. So for example, this is a sample sentence. So what are the main body parts of a plant? Describe each plant. So the other example, why is the barometer one of the most useful instruments to forecast the weather? Explained in one paragraph. So the abilities measured by restricted response items based on the following examples. So first, we have explained the cause and effect relationships. Second, we have described application of principles. Third, we have formulate valid conclusions. And the fourth, we have enumerate and explain. Second, we have extended response item. In this type, students are free to select and organize their responses. It measures higher order thinking skills such as analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. So these are the examples. First, we have evaluate the significance of the result of the national referendum of Scotland to the global peace condition. Second, we have what can you say about NATO's position and ISIS. Third, we have comment on the term new normal in relation to the environmental condition and climate change. So these are the abilities measured by extended response items. First, we have organize ideas. Second, we have integrate learning. Third, we have design an experiment. And fourth, we have evaluate the worth of ideas. To summarize, matching types are about associating premises and responses correctly, and essay tests measure deeper understanding through structured or open-ended writing. These types of tests help teachers measure not just memory but also how students analyze, interpret, and express ideas. That's all.
The continuation of our topic, I'm going to discuss to you about the assessment tools to measure authentic learning performance and products, or what we call KPUP. Level 4 of learning outcomes in KPUP, or knowledge, process, understanding, and performance, can be assessed through performance or product. These learning outcomes can be best be done through the use of authentic evaluation. Authentic evaluation, everyone, is a test that measures real-life tasks, performances, and actual products. The most common of the authentic assessments are the performance assessment and the use of portfolio. Okay, now let's proceed to performance assessment tools, and we have here the three types of it. First is the checklist, the second one is rating scale, and lastly is rubrics for portfolio. We have here the first type of the performance assessment tool, which is the checklist. A checklist is a simple yet highly effective tool for assessment. It helps identify the presence or absence of specific criteria in a student's performance, product, or behavior. It consists of a list of qualities, skills, or items that are expected to be observed. For each item, the assessor marks its presence with a check or its absence with an X. By focusing on binary outcomes like the present or absent, the checklist ensures that the assessment is objective and straightforward. It is especially useful for tasks requiring compliance with a specific standards. This is an example of a checklist where we can see instruction, and it consists of a list of items that are expected to be observed. So for each items, the assessor marks its presence with a check or its absent with an X. Now, let's proceed to the second type, which is the rating scale. A rating scale allows assessor to evaluate performance or products on a continuum rather than a simple yes-no categories. It provides more nuances feedback by assigning a score or a descriptive level to various criteria. The scale often ranges from low to high, or example of it is 1 to 5 or poor to excellent, and is used to quantify the degree of quality or achievement. Rating scales are ideal for capturing variations in students' performance and providing constructive feedback based on a specific criteria. This is one of an example of a rating scale where we can see various criterias like number one, have clear purposes, are relevant to environmental problems. So these are the criterias, and we have here um, scales ranges from 1 to 10. Now, let's proceed to the third and last type of a portfolio assessment tool. We have here rubrics for portfolio. Rubrics are structured tools that clearly outline criteria for evaluation along with different levels of performance for each criterion. A rubric breaks down the assessment into categories, like example of it is creativity, accuracy, organization, and describes performance levels for each category. Example is excellent, good, fair, or poor. Students receive scores or feedback based on how well their work aligns with the descriptions. Rubrics provide detailed, transparent expectation for students and help guide their work. They also make grading more consistent and objective. So that is rubrics for portfolio. This is one of an example of a rubric for portfolio. We can see here criterions and the description of the performance level of each categories. For example, is we can see here the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 together with its description that this rubric serves as a guide for the students, especially for their specific task that they can reach the expectation of their instructors or their teachers.
Moving on, we are going to discuss the levels of assessment for the levels of learning outcomes. Levels of assessment describes levels of the learning outcomes, which are the following. First, knowledge. Second, process or skills. Third, understanding. Fourth, products or performance. The levels of learning outcomes are also used to describe the levels of assessment. Through the DepEd Order 73 series of 2012, levels of learning outcomes are also the levels of assessment. In other words, the levels of assessment follow also the levels of thinking skills from lower to higher level. So the table below tells us the levels of learning outcomes or assessment, what to test and assess with these levels, the type of assessment that we can employ, and the percentage value in assessment. So first, let us have the level 1, which is knowledge. So the tests and assessments that we can do is the who, what, when, how, and why. And the type of assessment that we can employ in this level is the pencil and paper or non-paper and pencil, meaning we can also employ performance tasks. And the percentage value in assessment is 15%. The second level is process. So we can encourage our learners to construct meaning from knowledge, and we can employ pencil and paper or non-paper and pencil tests or type of assessment, and its percentage value in assessment is 25%. For the third level, which is understanding, the test and assessment that we can do is are explanations, interpretations, applications, empathy, perspective, and self-knowledge, big ideas, principles, and generalization. And the type of assessment that we can employ in this level is pencil and paper, and its percentage value in assessment is 30%. While the KPUP is still utilized in the grading system, it has been slightly modified by the written work, performance task, and quarterly assessment. A summative assessment is composed of written work, performance tasks, and quarterly assessments. So let us comprehensively explain what this means. So let's first explore the first component, which is the written work. So its purposes are the following. First, assess learners' understanding of concepts and application of skills in written form. So, since it is a written work, it is expected for our learners to produce a written output. Second, prepare learners for quarterly assessments. So, when should this type of exam or assessment be administered to our learners? Well, it can be administered at the end of the topic or unit. For the second component, we have performance task or PT. So its purposes are the following. First, involve students in the learning process individually or in collaboration with teammates over a period of time. Since performance tasks usually involve group tasks and the like, this would allow our students to process or foster collaboration among their teammates or their group mates. Second, give students opportunities to demonstrate and integrate their knowledge, understanding, and skills about topics or lessons learned in a specific real-life situation by performing and or producing evidence of their learning. Third, give students the freedom to express their learning in appropriate and diverse ways. Well, since we can employ several performance tasks, this would also allow our learners to share their talents, share their skills, and the like. So the last purpose is to encourage student inquiry, integration of knowledge, understanding, and skills in various contexts beyond the assessment period. So, when should this type of assessment be administered? It should be administered at the end of the lesson, focusing on a topic or skill lesson. Or it can be administered several times during the quarter. It can be in a form of formative assessment or in a summative assessment or quarterly assessment. For the senior high school composed of grade 11 and grade 12 students, the average of the quarterly grade produces the semester grade. So the general average is computed by dividing the sum of all semestral final grades by the total number of learning areas. Now, in reporting summative grades by quarter or semester or the end of the year, in the grading system, a raw score of 60 is considered the minimum passing grade. However, when this score appears on the student's report card, it is converted or transmuted to a 75, which is the standard passing grade shown. This transmutation ensures that students' performance is reflected fairly while still maintaining academic standards. The numerical grades on the report card represent different levels of proficiency, indicating how well a student has mastered the specific competencies or skills outlined in each subject area. So for us to gain an overview on the interpretation or the different levels of proficiency, I'll be explaining or sharing the levels of proficiency with their corresponding grading scale based on transmuted values. So for advanced learners, we have 90% and above. For proficient learners, we have 85% to 89%. For approaching proficiency learners, we have 80 to 84%. And for developing learners, we have 75 to 79%. In the cases of beginning learners, we have below up to 74%. So that is how we report our summative grades by quarter or semester of the end of the year. So in conclusion, evaluating the curriculum through the learning assessment is crucial or a critical process that ensures its relevance and effectiveness in meeting educational goals. By systematically measuring student learning outcomes, educators and administrators can identify the strengths of the current curriculum, such as which content areas are well understood and which teaching methods are most effective. Thank you, and I hope you learned something. God bless us all.